But the idea that we already know, Greg and I confess this every day. We've already won.
We've already won.
We have already won. We say this as often as we can remember to say it. We've already won. So if we have that assurance and we believe that, we can tell the story while we're in it.
Right now.
Because it's going to help somebody.
Exactly.
I sound like my grandmother who was a pastor, but it's going to help somebody.
That's right.
Somebody needs to hear it because somebody is in the thick of it and hasn't quite come as far as we have, and needs to believe that just hanging on for that extra day, making that push, doing that work, waking up just a little bit early, working when you don't feel like working, dreaming, making that call, sending in that email. They need to believe that is going to be worth their while. They need to believe that there is some fruit that's going to bear, on the other side of that work.
Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to I'm All Over the Place, featuring Dara Starr Tucker and my special co-host,
Greg Bryant.
We're glad to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the first episode, which was called No True Scotsman. We saw that there were at least 100 downloads as of now, which is really cool for a brand new podcast.
Your fans are coming through. Your friends are coming through. We just appreciate the community for the love and support. And it continues to grow, even down to the minute now. But we're back with another episode. First of all, if there's folks that don't know where to find you, Dara, let's just give that out if we can.
I'm on Instagram at Dara Tucker B, DARA TUCKER B. And I'm on TikTok at Dara Starr Tucker, DARA STARR TUCKER. And just a reminder, there is a video version of this podcast. We're not just audio, we're video as well. So if you want to watch us on YouTube, you can do that at youtube.com/Dara Tucker. But I would suggest downloading it as well. Download it to whatever your favorite podcast app is, even if you're going to watch it, because that helps us with the numbers.
Absolutely.
And tell your friends.
Tell
some folks about it.
We're gonna
get into some stuff this time.
Too.
Yeah. Give us a good rating. Leave a review if you can. Doesn't have to be long. All of that stuff helps us to move up in the charts, which is what the goal is. We want to reach as many people as we can.
That's right. We have got a very unique smorgasbord of a show today.
Mm-hmm. We're all over the place.
That's right. You're calling this on jokes, journey, and jazz.
Oh, I think you're calling this on jokes, the journey, and jazz, or jokes, jazz, and the journey. This is what we're calling it. This is Greg's clever title. Jokes, jazz, and the journey.
Oh my goodness.
We're a little bit corny today, but it's for a reason, because it ties everything in that we kind of want to talk about.
That's right.
A lot of activities within the last week or so, both online and off. Mm-hmm. The first of which is right here. You'll notice if you're watching, we are wearing our bakery t-shirts, meaning Tony Baker's Bakery. He is one of our favorite comedians.
That's right.
Kind of online personalities and true blue stand-up comedians that we went to go see at Caroline's here in the New York area.
Man.
In New York City last night.
Oh my goodness. Tony was incredible. Chances are he's one of your favorite comedians' favorite comedian. It's a matter of time with Tony. He's already selling out Caroline's in New York City. Headlining, I believe, his first or second package tour. He's got some openers with him, and he's the close. But man, Tony has been inspirational to you now, Dara, for several years. And you're finding not just the funny, but his actual journey, his actual progression has been somewhat of a motivating thing. You've been joking to me and saying that he's your cousin.
Yeah, he's my cousin. It's
Tony.
kind of what we want to talk about with this particular episode is like people who are great at sharing their journey. Mm-hmm. And I think Tony Baker is actually one of those people that we look up to, both of us kind of look up to as like, this dude just puts it all out there. He puts it on the line. I mean, you don't only admire his work. He started out doing animal voiceovers, which he still does, not as much. But he's really moved into becoming just an all-around personality that you can root for. And yeah, I call him my cousin. Tony and I have recently become connected on Instagram. So we follow each other. We have a mutual admiration society. It's so cool, to know that somebody that I have looked up to and just admired his journey for years now. He actually knows who I am.
Yeah, that's really
paying attention to my content. He's reposting my stuff. I'm like, what in the world?
That's amazing.
When I first saw him come through, I think you told me that he followed me. I was like, Tony! And I'm just texting my brothers and sisters who I do all my big celebrations with and tell them who's following and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But him, Tony in particular, it was just like, that's my dude. You know, it was so exciting to see, like, man, he's latched on to, like, you know, this informational stuff. You know, he's a deep guy.
He is. And it just begs the question, you know, someone like you on your climb, you know, what is inspirational about Tony and what has really gotten to you about not only his skill set, but the way that he's moving, you know, not waiting on Hollywood, but just making his own way.
That's kind of the theme with a lot of the people we want to talk about today, is just like, I mean, he's really kind of a gold standard in terms of that, because like you said, Hollywood has not necessarily been checking for him up till now. We're starting to get inklings that there may be some raindrops out there, some little, you know, a little start of a pitter patter of Hollywood taking notice of this guy, who, in my opinion, and I think yours too, is one of the funniest comedians working today. And I'm such a comedy connoisseur that many people might be surprised to, you know, to hear someone who's really into, if I started naming the comedians I'm into, I'd probably get in trouble for half of them, because half of them can't stay off of the you know what list.
Yeah.
They're always, you know, messing up in some way or the other. Before a profession that's so racked with so much toxic masculinity, you know, it's like he doesn't feel the need to play into that necessarily. He's just different, you know. I know it would probably be an insult in some people's eyes to call him the anything of today, but I do think of him as like almost like a Sinbad figure of today. He's just this flat-footed, funny guy who's probably been funny all his life. He just gives one look or says one word, and just everything about him just oozes funny.
Yeah.
So it's like he knows who he is. He's confident in that. He doesn't have to be like the edgiest, most like, you know, boundary pushing comedian. And we've seen very recently how that can come to slap you in the face.
Watch out.
Cases,
Watch out.
That can come right back to smack you in the face, trying to be like this super edgy guy. But he's not that guy, you know.
No,
he's just like, and I love Chris Rock.
Yeah.
Love
me
him.
too.
I think he's brilliant, even though he's gotten in trouble for a whole lot, even beyond what he did the other week. But Tony just, I don't know, he's just a straightforward, funny guy. I can get into the esoteric people.
Sure.
I can get into the, you know, wry, witty folks, more brainy kind of thing, or clever, or, you know, just all sorts of different comments. I don't discriminate, honestly. It's like, if you're a Kevin Hart, even if you're, you know, I won't name the other guy I was about to name, but if you're a Kevin Hart type and you're just silly and you're goofy and you do wacky things that are just freaking hilarious, like I'm gonna laugh.
Yeah.
I'm gonna laugh. And Tony Baker, in my estimation, is like one of the most genuinely funny guys out there. I mean, I think I heard some belly laughs from Greg last night, which is unusual in public.
It's true. You did. And I heard some from you too.
Oh man, I was cracking up from the minute he got on stage. He just, you know, he'll tear his face up and I'm just falling out, for no good reason.
But there's so many aspects. You know, you think about, you know, One Trick Pony in stand-up comedy. He has a style, he has a POV, point of view, but he really is informed by not just the typical African-American comedians. Nothing wrong with that. But I can tell that he studied maybe some observational humor. He takes his time and he knows how to sit in a groove. Of course, we're musicians, so we talk in those terminologies, but he'll sit in a story and we'll flesh it out, flesh it out, and it just becomes funnier and funnier and funnier and funnier. I mean, he's got a lot of goods.
Not everybody can do that. Some people, when they try to wring the funny out of a joke, it just becomes less funny. It's like, dude, come on, move on.
Right.
Move on. But he's with him, it's like, man, you just found a new level. Oh, and there's another level under that.
Right.
It's amazing to watch him work. And he's just one of those people. Again, I almost have to apologize for the comparisons to Sinbad, although I love Sinbad.
Yeah.
But I know he gets a lot of flack.
Yeah.
From the comedian, community. I think Black folks know Sinbad is funny. I think that's universally understood. He's kind of your aunt's favorite comedian or whatever. But he's one of those guys that makes it look effortless.
Yeah.
He makes it look like he's just up there fooling around. And it kind of distracts you from the fact that, man, there's work involved in this.
Right.
There's real artistry and craftsmanship involved in what he's doing.
Yeah. I have a bit of a deeper question, though, and maybe it's altruism or maybe just, a subject that we can't avoid. But he has used his art to help his healing. And I know you know something about that. Help us to understand, from your perspective, how that is helpful to the artist as well as to the audience.
Yeah. Well, if there are people who don't know, if you're familiar with Tony Baker, you probably do know that he lost his son in a car accident maybe 6 months ago.
Yeah.
A really, really tragic event. And I mean, from the very beginning, he was bringing us into his journey. He was bringing us into that experience of just like some of the most awful like realities of, walking through this thing of like planning his son's memorial and all of this stuff. And he found a way to deal with it with humor, with honesty, with grace, with courage. He let us know when he was crying. He's like, man, I'm crying. And then I turn around and see so-and-so, some funny thing or whatever. These two dogs just sitting there looking at me, or they're going to town in the middle of the street and they just turn around and look at me like, what are you looking at? I'm sitting here crying and wiping away tears and cracking up at these dogs in the middle of the street or whatever. Just some small nuance of what he was going through during that process, which to me was generous and it was inspiring. Because I can't think of too many more people that would have been able to, and he's still in the midst of it. It's not like it's over.
Right.
But I can't think of too many people who would have been able to bring their audience, their people along for such a painful process.
Right.
In the way that he has. And yeah, like you're mentioning, I lost both my parents back in 2014. And I had to, embark upon my own, process of like writing through this, singing through it, performing through it. Because my main job, if you all don't know, my main job is as a singer. I have performed what most people call jazz for many years. And so walking through that process, for me, it was just like, either you're going to shut down and go to a place where you can't create and you can't produce and it is blocking, your creativity, or you're going to use it. It's going to be kind of an either or proposition. You're either going to, ignore it and it's going to it's going to impede your creative process, or it's going to fuel it. That's how I feel from an artistic perspective. Yeah. So I had to use it. I wrote an entire album of tribute songs to my parents. As you know, I'm still writing tribute songs to my parents, and can't seem to stop. I had to stop myself from writing in probably 2017. Because that's all I was writing. Wow. That's all I was writing. So I'm like, okay, I gotta find another space to be in. But I mean, my audiences, they've heard about this stuff.
They have.
They're still hearing about it. I do not get up and perform without doing a tribute to one or both of my parents, both of them.
Right. That's right.
I don't perform without tributing my parents and talking about them. So yeah, on some level, and that's certainly not the same thing as losing a child.
Right.
But on some level, just from a basic grief perspective, I get it. I get it. It's like, man, this art thing is a part of who I am. And there is a seismic, shakeup that is going on in my life. It is going to impact the art. It's going to impact, it can't not impact the art if you really are about your art. So Tony, man, I just hats off.
Yeah, man.
Hats off to that dude, man.
Yeah.
Last night just killed.
Oh, he killed. A+.
If you can see him on the road, I'm not being paid to advertise Tony Baker's tour, but if you can see him on the road, just do that.
Yeah, go.
Do that. Because I feel like he's like, to me, it's just so exciting because I feel like you said, it feels like he's my cousin.
Yeah.
If he's my cousin, then he's your cousin by marriage.
Sure.
So,
he's silly.
So to watch him just rise, and because of like the work this dude has put in, and I don't know what his audience was before he developed this online presence, but like he has hammered away. I mean, he's in front of that camera daily, multiple times a day. He's doing lives. He's doing content content for his Patreon. He's doing a podcast. He's doing work with Kev on stage and them. He's just, I mean, just in any way that he can be before his audience, he's just doing it.
Yep.
And with the animal voiceovers and stuff that are pulling people in, but he has cultivated his audience in real time.
That's it.
And we have gotten the chance to see him like blossom because of it. Is this his first headlining tour?
Maybe. I want to check on that because I know he's toured as a headliner on his own, but this literally is him plus two of his, fellow comedians, and Tony is the closer. And it's under his name. So it's a unique situation.
Yeah, we're musicians who have toured, a lot over the years. So we're just all in the background, just like trying to figure out, okay, now if this many tickets are sold and blah, 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 blah. And then they've got plane tickets and this many people are coming along with them. And how does this logistically work? And how are they getting from place to place? And, they're probably doing pretty good. Yeah. Like, we're excited. We are cheering him on. Really, and just like, man, it is so inspiring. It is so inspiring to watch him do what he does and the way that he does it. So yeah, I think he's just on Instagram at Tony Baker. If on the off chance that there's anybody who has not heard of this guy, he just appeared on the Breakfast Club.
He did.
So that's something new to check out. Greg listened. I haven't listened to it yet.
Really good interview. And then I know he announced on the Breakfast Club his first HBO special.
That is so cool.
Through Marlon Wayans.
So cool.
April 21st, I think. Yeah, we'll be checking that.
I'm just like the proud mom or something. I'm just giddy with excitement because I'm just like, Tony Baker. They ought to put that Tony Baker on SNL. Right. He ought to be the one they're calling to go on tour with Kevin Hart.
It's coming.
Like all the opportunities, he deserves them.
Speaking of SNL and HBO specials, another comedian, Gerard Carmichael. Brand new one called Rothaniel, which is basically his first name that he has kept secret until now. And I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't watched it, but we've had some thoughts about it. And specifically, I want to cut to the fact of there's a central theme about love, receiving it from the ones you hold dearest. But when you introduce a new aspect of your life, in his case, he's just come out as gay. He was raised in the South by a black family from North Carolina that is, let's put it mildly, uncomfortable.
Yeah, they're church folks.
LGBTQ plus LGBTQ plus issues. But he is having to reconcile in real time on the stage love and the concept of how he feels it's being withheld, or he's only been loved up to a certain point to his satisfaction. I know you have some thoughts about that, but I really want to, ask you about, in the context of this special, how you related to him uncovering these issues, and did it prick anything in you?
Yeah, it was just so interesting. I've always locked into LGBTQ stories, LGBTQIA stories, because I've embarked, and like I said, I will try to limit my usage of the word journey, but you're gonna hear it multiple times because this is it's kind of a podcast about the journey. So we're just gonna journey it up.
All right,
I think
today, especially,
hopefully unabashedly. I'm just gonna stop being self-conscious about that word, which I kind of smirk at sometimes. But anyway, I kind of lock into these LGBTQ stories because I feel a certain affinity. I feel a certain sisterhood with them, in that I was raised in a very, we never used the word religious. That was a dirty word growing up. But I was raised in the charismatic Word of Faith church. And then my grandmother was a Pentecostal minister. So I had, foot in both of those worlds. So charismatic, Pentecostal, which is kind of an evangelical world, really is what it is. Non-denominational evangelical world. Think Joel Osteen and that type of thing, but just a little more, a lot wilder than that. And then Pentecostal holiness, which is what my grandmother was.
All the way live.
Rolling around in the floor and dancing and, hands laid on and speaking in tongues and all of this stuff. So there were a lot of parts of my upbringing that I did appreciate. But there just was always that thing that was tugging at me like, hey, there's just something that's not jibing with me about me in this world. Like they were constantly having to explain to me, how to be, how to comport myself in these environments. I remember one story my dad used to tell a lot is the choir was singing a song called I'm Clean, and it was talking about being, your spirit or soul being cleaned and washed clean by the blood of Jesus.
Okay.
And there's a line in the song, it's by the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir, but he was the music minister at a large church in Detroit, Michigan at the time. And the choir was singing it, and the soloist says, "Oh, hallelujah, I'm not the same, I'm clean." And when the soloist said, "I'm not the same," the entire church just erupted for whatever reason. Now, here I am in 2022, and I still can't tell you particularly why the church erupted on that specific line. I'm sure there are others who could. I get the concept, and I got the concept then. But I just remember sitting there and being like, well, what happened there? Why did everybody just freak out?
Right.
And then, I turned to my mother, I guess, or whoever was sitting beside me. I said, "What's so good about I'm not the same?" That story right there, it stayed with me through my entire life. My father never stopped telling that story. This is Dara. What's so good about I'm not the same? Like, they knew from an early age that I just didn't get it. There was something about it that I just didn't get.
Yeah.
And it's not that I didn't appreciate the spiritual environment. I still do. I appreciate a lot of Greg and I do a lot of confessions and, affirmations, and
Sure.
we try to lock into that spiritual thing. And, while we're striving for what we're doing, I don't reject it particularly, but there's something about it that's just it just has never quite gelled. I've always felt like a stranger in a strange land in that environment. So I guess for that reason, with LGBTQ stories, I'm just like, man, there's something about it that I just get. I get that feeling of like, I am not of this world, this environment.
Searching for meaning and belonging.
Yeah. And also the feeling of hiding out. Being in the closet, being closeted in your questioning of certain belief systems, your questioning of, why are all these people falling out when somebody lays hands on them and prays for them? Was that really real? I don't know that person really was feeling the spirit. I think they just fell out because everybody else fell out. Because it seems like there's a lot of pressure for everybody to fall out in the spirit. I was asking those questions at, 8, 9, 10 years old, where I think a lot of people just, basked in the environment. They just loved it. I had siblings who just soaked it up, and it was just their thing, and they thrived in it and still do, many of them. But I just, that wasn't my experience. And so, all of that to say, LGBTQIA stories, they have always had a particular draw for me. So I can't say that it was even all that shocking for him to reveal that. I was kind of surprised. Like, I didn't know he was gay.
Right.
But
this is New York City.
Right. When he said it, I was just like, okay, you're gay. Okay. Now what's the part 2? And I think the audience might've felt the same way. It was just like,
slow to applaud.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and applaud that because that's cool. But for him, and I don't mean to minimize that for him, how meaningful it was for him, because obviously him coming from the kind of environment, partly the environment that I do.
Yeah.
And that you do.
Yeah. True.
Greg's dad's a pastor.
Yeah.
Greg knows what that's like. That's probably wouldn't have been cool if you had to make that kind of an announcement.
Exactly.
So we get it to that degree, but it's just like, man, this dude's been in the entertainment industry for many years.
Long time.
So why would this be something?
He's coming out later in life.
Yeah. It kind of surprised me. It's like, I wonder why this is still such an area of conflict for him, not to minimize his story in the least. But a lot of the special was just the emotional capital of the special hinged on that. And again, not to give too much away in terms of the actual content of it, but I loved the tone of it. And I think for both of us, probably through maybe half of it, it was like, it was a revelation. It was brilliant. And then what happened halfway through, Greg?
I think he just ran out of material, personally.
Oh boy.
But I think that's juxtaposed with his real desire and quest for love. Maybe that's why he waited so long, because he knew he had the love of those closest to him in a certain category. If he didn't say anything, he was going to get the unconditional love. But now that he's had to be truthful with himself and with others, there's the risk that he took and that he knows He's loved to a certain point in his estimation. And to hear him grapple with that on the stage and to seek that, in my opinion, from that audience there that night was uncomfortable to watch. It was also begging the question, it's okay, but do you have any kind of a clever way, funny or unfunny, to be able to tie this together? It really feels unresolved to this point. Maybe there's another special in the works. Maybe there's a movie. I don't remember exactly what he has on his calendar. But the irresolution of it all made me drop it down a grade or two than I would normally have given it based on the first 20 minutes of brilliance.
Yeah, it seemed like Sid just sort of broke apart and he sort of maybe lost his way partway through it. And I like to think that, you know, obviously coming from the church world and doing performance stuff that I do, I know what it's like to have to speak to an audience, and you get to the gig and it's like you got a certain set list waiting and ready to go, but you want to leave room for the Spirit. You want to leave room for that Spirit thing to come through, and you don't want everything to be super mapped out. You want it to be just a little bit loose. But like the play, the looseness that he left in it, I felt like it was just a little much. It was a little much for me. But doesn't mean that this special, because what I'm hearing about it, the little that I've heard about it, has been unabashed praise. So I think a lot of people saw where he was coming from. I love the tone of the special. I love the fact that he's using a jazz soundtrack. You filmed it at Blue Note in New York. Here in New York. He's like,
you actually heard the applause and like, I know the sound of that room.
Yeah, we both were just like, that sounds like the Blue Note, because it was so dark you couldn't really tell. But we were like, I think that's the Blue Note. And it was the Blue Note, which is a jazz club up here. And so I think just in terms of tone and his physicality, how he sat, he didn't stand.
No,
he sat. How he handled himself, and just watching him, it did feel like a revelation. It was like, man, because I was admiring him years ago. He's been kind of a promising up and coming comedian for a while, and then he got a show on NBC called the Gerard Carmichael Show.
Where I fell in with it.
Which I didn't love. I didn't love the show. There were some critics who thought it was great, but it got canceled pretty quickly. I didn't love the show. I was disappointed in it. The next thing you know, he's popping up on SNL hosting Saturday Night Live, talking about this HBO special. I'm like, oh, wow, we got to check this out. So it's good to see him. It's good to see him, having a resurgence, coming back, and in this very calculated way, obviously. But I'm looking forward to what's ahead for him, because I think this is exactly what he needs to launch him into just a different kind of stratosphere. He's got I'm going to say the word again, a very unique journey that is still unfolding. Now, in terms of the journey itself, those folks who are doing a great job, just sort of telling their story. And a lot of what this podcast is about is for us, is making that shift into doing a better job of telling our story. Me doing a better job of telling my story, us doing a better job of telling our story. We were driving in the car the other day.
I knew you were going to tell us. You should.
I looked at Greg. I was like, well, I've had, I had an interview for some kind of radio show or something earlier that day. And I'd had a couple of conversations with friends, throughout that week. This was a few weweeks ago. And I said, I've been telling people, I can't wait to look back over my life and tell the story of how I got over.
Mahalia Jackson
song. She's one of my musical heroes.
Look out.
How I got over. And we all admire stories of, cajillionaires like Oprah Winfrey, Tyler Perry, who I listen to a lot because he's a super inspirational figure. People who enjoy just recounting the journey and helping you to understand how they got where they got. We all love that. So I'm like, can't wait till I become that person who's wealthy and famous and admired enough to where people want to hear my story. And I was telling Greg this. I was saying this for probably the third or fourth time that week. I was like, I can't wait to look back and be able to tell the story of how I got over. And at that very moment, I bit my tongue, physically bit my tongue accidentally and hurt myself. I was like, what? And when that happens to me, when I have some sort of physical injury while I'm talking, If I bite my tongue, my lip, if I stub my toe, run my knee into something, trip while I'm speaking about something, that is always a signal to me from the universe, from whatever, that like, wait a minute, stop, think about what you're saying, back up, slow down. So there's some recalibration that needs to happen.
Right.
I mean, that's the clearest sign to me. Just like, oh, what just happened there? I bit my tongue while I was saying this thing that I thought was some great, revelation in my life. So I'm like, how do I need to be rethinking this? Why am I speaking of this in terms of that this being something I have to wait to do? There's a story that's happening now. There's a story that's happening right now. And there are people that I am supposed to connect with who need to hear about my story. And for anyone listening, there are people who are waiting right now to hear your story. It's really not about waiting until some magical moment in the future, some unforeseeable date where all of a sudden it becomes obvious that you are an unquestioned success.
Yeah.
And I think even the idea of being an unquestioned success is probably overrated. How many of us will really achieve the level of success that someone like an Oprah Winfrey or a Tyler Perry achieve, meaning monetarily, or even in terms of our reach. But we have a specific group of people that we are meant to speak to in this world. When I first started putting my content out online, when I first started my TikTok, a little over a year ago, I looked at Greg and I said, I have an audience. There are people who are waiting to hear what I have to say. I feel so strongly in my heart. I said this to him, just standing right over there. I said that I feel so strongly in my heart that there is an audience for me. And partly because of watching some of these folks that we're about to talk about, but I just have not figured out how to connect with them. I haven't figured out who they are. They just haven't found me yet. But I need to figure out how to reach out to them. And so part of what I started doing online, part of the way that my audience has grown to, I think now we're right at the cusp of 700,000 on TikTok. This is like a little over a year after I said this to him.
Yeah, almost 26.
That I know my audience is out there and I've got to figure out what it is that I need to do in order to connect with them, And the audience is starting to grow now on Instagram, which is kind of a new thing. This is in the last few months,
organically.
Is starting to grow on Instagram as well. So the people that I am meant to connect with who are finding me through the work that I am putting out, there is a story that I have to tell that they need to hear right now.
Wow.
In the here and now. It's not about waiting until it is perceived that I have achieved all that I am to achieve. So that's the lesson for me, in the biting of the tongue. The metaphorical and physical biting of my tongue. There's an old song by a singer named Sandra Crouch, Andre Crouch's sister, Sandra Crouch. It was a popular choir song when we were kids. It's called Don't Wait Till the Battle Is Over to Shout Now. Because in the end, you're going to win. You're going to win. So for me, it's important for me to lock into that certainty, like whatever that winning is. And I think, the idea of winning has been much too narrowly defined, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But the idea that we already know, Greg and I confess this every day. We've already won.
We've already won.
We have already won. We say this as often as we can remember to say it. We've already won. So if we have that assurance and we believe that, we can tell the story while we're in it
right now,
because it's going to help somebody.
Exactly.
I sound like my grandmother who was a pastor, but it's going to help somebody.
That's right.
Somebody needs to hear it because somebody is in the thick of it and hasn't quite come as far as we have, and needs to believe that just hanging on for that extra day, making that push, doing that work, waking up just a little bit early, working when you don't feel like working, dreaming, making that call, sending in that email. They need to believe that is going to be worth their while. They need to believe that there is some fruit that's going to bear, on the other side of that work.
Yeah.
So they don't need to simply be looking at Oprah Winfrey and Tyler Perry
when is the
or
ship
Kevin
gonna
Hart,
come in?
or Kevin Hart or somebody who's like way down the road. It's like, they need folks that they can lock into right now.
Yeah. And even in some of those instances, those folks were their own Calvary.
They sure were.
They were their own Calvary.
They sure were.
And just two people I want to focus on before we move on. One is Kev on stage, and he says it like this: start before you're ready.
Absolutely.
Start before you're ready. And to see that gentleman take his own money, take his own savings, sell off things. And
I mean, even before that, to move from Tacoma, Washington. This is another comedian that we follow, a social media kind of presence. He's just kind of been an overall funny guy online and has parlayed that into a stand-up career and has facilitated careers for a bunch of people in his sphere.
Has his own app,
Kev on stage,
his own studios and network, starting to do scripted shows. And but the point is, where I really connected with him was to see his tour when we were still living in Nashville. We went to see him at, I think it was Tennessee State University in 2018. I think it was actually just before you were about to go on the road with our friend, the hybrid guitarist Charlie Hunter. So touring was in my mind. I'm like, how does this work? This is a different genre. This is comedy, but this is an independent tour that he set up on his own with his own money. I forget how many cities, 40 cities, something like that. Sold all he had, took all of his savings and all this. He didn't sell all he had, but it was very financially risky. He had left his position at All Def Digital. And man, we went to a sold out show at Tennessee State University in a small theater that probably held somewhere around 300 people.
Yeah. Maybe four.
That's maybe. Three. Yeah, it's right around in there. The show was incredible. We got to hear him, Tony Baker, to hear more. All of them were traveling with Kev. But at the end, everybody got a chance to take a picture, if they wanted, with the comedians, whether they bought merchandise or not, which adds to that whole, I can touch you, shake your hand. I'm rooting for you because I know you a little bit. I got to shake your hand. And that whole independently agile position towards making your own Calvary, making your own destiny, hit me at a crucial time and hit you at a crucial time. And my goodness, hats off to him for what he continues to do and what he continues to achieve. Because like you say, he didn't wait.
He sure didn't.
He didn't wait his turn. He took his turn.
He did. And he started out as this kind of churchy comedian who's they call themselves the Playmakers. He and a couple of friends of his, I mean, dancing around in the church and just imitating how different church people dance around and shout and how they pray for each other or preachers do this. And it was all kind of revolved around church comedy because that's where he came from.
Sure. Telling his story.
His
experience.
Exactly. Just using what he had and then slowly navigating away from that. And we've seen again, because he has shown us his story. He's told us his story. We have watched his progression. We feel so deeply invested in who he is and where he has come from, what he is building. He's letting us in on even this is the house, we're getting, this is the car we're pushing for. And we don't know what that's like behind the scenes.
Right.
We don't know what conversations he and his wife have. We don't know what kind of dumb inboxes that he's getting from silly people
and his detractors, or jealous.
Yeah, you never really know what somebody's going through in the background. And that's something I want to talk about in the Finding Your Voice segment at the end. Just when you get this sort of haterade from people, which for a lot of people, you're not putting we are not putting that out there. I deal with a tremendous amount of
ignorance.
Oh man.
That includes, death threats, spewing of hatred.
Yeah. If you talk about race, you have to be ready for whatever.
My God.
You have to be ready for whatever, but just learning to fortify yourself against that. But, we don't know what he's dealing with in the background. Right. And then others that we've admired as well. You've recently latched on to Tabitha Brown.
I have. And her husband, Chance, man, she left North Carolina with him, to become an actress in California, moved to a situation that was, far away from LA because of the efficiency of the living situation. That went kind of wonky, and she stayed out there searching for jobs for years. Her husband takes a job as a police officer to help her find her dream. And just now, within the last 2 years, She has retired her husband, and he's got his sports league coaching basketball.
Yeah.
And she is on YouTube with a children's show.
Yeah, has an agency.
Is touring the world with her vegan books and her lectures, and has become this.
She's appearing on Ellen and has won an NAACP Image Award.
She is a down-home Mrs. Rogers, if I can call her that to save time. But it resonates.
Yeah.
And the truth that she tells and shares is from such a sincere place. She lost her mother several years ago and had to endure that, and she had to endure overcoming physical illness for a year. She was down.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And
which is why she converted to veganism.
Exactly.
Yeah, and she blew up just from just eating a wrap from Whole Foods, some kind of vegan wrap from Whole Foods.
Exactly.
Whole Foods.
And driving Uber on a break one day, and 500,000, a million views in a day, and it keeps going up and up and up. Kudos, Tabitha. Yeah. Kudos, Chance. Inspirational. Yeah, absolutely. Beyond belief.
Yeah. And Tyrell Grice is another one of the folks I follow. Just like he's if you don't know him, he is a singer, but he's really more of an interviewer at this point, just a personality.
Yeah.
And he has a show, I don't know what he even calls it. The Tyrell Show really is what it's called. Yeah. And he does a number of different features on the show. It's on YouTube. If you've ever seen videos that have come across your feed with singers being interviewed in front of a turquoise blue wall, that's Tyrell Grice. And he's he's got probably 1 million followers at this point on YouTube and is working in tandem with YouTube to build out. He's just always offered such a professional presentation.
Yeah, he has.
Just the graphics behind that show, the editing, the thought that goes behind it. He started out doing reaction videos. On YouTube, reactions to award shows, reactions to people singing on American Idol, on The Voice, on a show called The Four. That's how I found him initially. And he has such personality and was able to deliver, his evaluation and analysis of these singers with such flair till you're just like, man, I'm watching for him. I don't even necessarily care about the singer, but like his reaction to the singer was what drew me in. And now he's shifted over to really more of an interview show. Yeah, and he's had on some huge people, Layla Hathaway, the Clark sisters. I mean, many, hot singers. It's become kind of a go-to place.
He's the spot.
That a lot of people are wanting to get their clients to. This happens in this dude's living room, or at least initially.
Okay.
This was in his living room in front of a green screen.
That's awesome.
And because he was able, he and his producer Roxy were able to pull together such a professional presentation, you would just never know.
Right.
He had Layla Hathaway in his kitchen.
That's awesome.
So for him, again, another example of a dude that just was like, I want to find my people. He had worked as a production assistant, I think, on the Apollo, Showtime at the Apollo, maybe.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, had done that, and I don't even know if he had done any other shows, but he was out in LA, and thinking that this is kind of a common theme with a lot of these folks. Is like, oh, I thought Tabitha Brown was trying to be an actress.
Yeah,
Tyrell, I think, was out there to do acting. And a lot of them just, they fell into whatever they fell into. I'm a singer, and have fallen into this kind of social justice and even, some satire, comedic stuff, but explainer videos and music appreciation, film appreciation videos. And somehow my audience has taken off doing that. But it just it's weirdly an interesting theme with a lot of folks who have taken off in online spaces, is that you're just experimenting with things, and you figure out what it is that your audience wants from you. I've turned to Greg on a couple of occasions. I'm like, people want to hear me talk.
Yeah.
They want to hear me. That's what they want to hear me do? Really? I've been out here singing my heart out and writing my heart out and, have music that I feel like needs to be heard.
Yeah.
But like, wow, they are responding to this conversation. That's what they want to hear. And so part of it is you're just kind of going with it. Just going with the flow and responding to what people are responding to. They respond to it and you respond to their response. And then it becomes a conversation where they are fueling the work that you do.
Yeah.
And helping you to understand, like, okay, people took to this. Like, recently a video I put up about jazz took off. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
Took off much better than what I expected. It's like, you don't even know what people are wanting to hear about half the time.
You really don't. It's really a guessing game.
You got to listen. You just got to listen.
Exactly. You can calculate to a certain point, but after that, It's the work of the algorithm and the work of the audience that latches on to those first few seconds that you're talking about. And let's just go there now. Sometimes when you prepare your schedule, for the month, we kind of banter about what might be good for this month or this week to do. Is there any kind of specialty that we can focus in on that's in your wheelhouse?
Yeah. Well, I think it's I think it's a little much to suggest that I have a schedule for the month. I am in no way that organized.
No, but
absolutely not that not even week to week. I'm like, I think I want to. Yesterday, I just ended up in total distraction and a distraction from the distraction,
Dara,
doing scripting on jazz and kids shows. Like that was absolutely not my intention at the beginning of this week, but it's about to happen.
There is some planning. And there is plenty of room to play, which is what you were talking about earlier. There's plenty of room to play.
What is Jared? I don't know if it's even Jeremiah or Isaiah, whatever this way. Y'all know I've been out of church for a little while. A man has his plans, but God orders his steps or something like that. Man, something to that degree. Y'all, butchering scriptures,
but
y'all.
The thing about
that needs to be the clip we share. Me just butchering scriptures. Every week we're going to have a clip of me butchering some scripture that I should know that I had to memorize as a child. There's something about people planning what they're going to do, but what you thought you were going to do ain't what you really ended up doing because you didn't let the Spirit have its say. Mm-hmm. So when you finally let the Spirit have its say, it ended up being something different.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say.
I'm with you.
So in a macro sense and in a micro sense, I experience that constantly.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
We're glad we got that straightened out. But the topic of the etymology of the word jazz, it came up. It's like, you know what? This is April. This is the appreciation month for this music. But let's not tell, because you don't do this, just generic stories. You set out to actually make a holistic view of the etymology of the word and musicians subsequently rejecting it. And then having, again, the agency to claim not just the title, but how it should be grouped along with all of Black greatness. I say all of Black music.
Rather than explaining the video here, we're going to show it. We're going to show the video called Jazz is a Four-Letter Word. And we'll kind of... We're going to show the video called Jazz is a Four-Letter Word, and we'll kind of give an overview of some of my thoughts about that. Here it is. Jazz is one of the most misused words of the English language. It's been called straight ahead, hard, cool, smooth. It's been fused, and it's been free. But to many so-called jazz musicians, the word itself is tantamount to a slur.
I don't like that word jazz.
I'm Dara Starr Tucker, and this is The Breakdown. The word jazz is thought to have derived from the slang term jazzin', which can be traced to this word, which means what you probably think it means. It's a vulgar word that was used in the brothels of New Orleans to refer to copulation. Many words that describe Black music spring from African American vernacular English, the original meanings of which are somewhat less than savory. Boogie woogie, gig, jelly roll, juke, swing, funk. If you decide to look them up, be prepared to do some pearl clutching. Now, the earliest date the word jazz appears in print is in 1915 in the Chicago Sunday Tribune, where a white writer named Gordon Seagrove is attempting to describe to a white audience the effect that the blues had on people. The article, called Blues is Jazz and Jazz is Blues, correctly states that the music he was describing had its roots in Black American folk culture. But the extracting of the Black influence and the crass commercialization for financial gain, coupled with the ascribing of this vulgar term to it, left a bad taste in the mouths of many of its progenitors, which still exist today. The first known recording that called itself jazz was actually made by a white band, the original Dixieland Jazz Band, JASS, which later became JAZZ. That happened in 1917. The band was started by a promoter in Chicago who set out to assemble a white group who could imitate the sounds that Black musicians were creating in New Orleans. They initially thought it might be seen as a novelty recording, but white audiences took to it, and it launched the Dixieland craze of the 1920s. The pattern of white musicians latching onto music created by Black musicians and sanitizing it for white audiences would repeat itself multiple times throughout the 20th century and beyond. It's become so predictable you can set your watch to it. The blues and ragtime are co-opted to become jazz. R&B, boogie woogie, and jump blues were sanitized for wide audiences and became rock and roll. Early jazz funk was stomped flat as a pancake and became smooth jazz. And even hip-hop, born out of the gritty street music of New York's outer boroughs, eventually underwent a whitewashing that produced this.
Never stop, yo, I don't know. Turn off the lights and now blow.
Over the years, musicians like Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker, and Miles Davis have suggested various terms to label the music that more accurately represents what was begun by those early black folk artists in New Orleans.
Jazz is a four-letter word, which means exploitation. It means that we are being used. See, jazz opens the door for anybody. Everybody else kind of comes behind and they just take a little bit of what all these people are doing and make something out of it and make money out of it.
You call it black classical music. Do you consider gospel and rhythm and blues?
Yes, all of it is beautiful black music to me.
Contemporary musicians such as trumpeter Nicholas Payton have advocated for a similar umbrella term, Black American music.
So we didn't use that word. Louis Armstrong himself said we didn't call it that. They're making a mockery of the music the way I see it. It's minstrelsy. Duke Ellington said that 80 years ago. Call it Negro music, which is why I call it Black American music.
Though many take issue with labeling it this way, they would never dispute that mariachi music, for instance, is Mexican in origin, regardless of who played it or what other cultures influenced it. Korean fusion cooking is still Korean, and that probably boils down to the fact that those cultures are seen as distinct and worthy of recognition, where Black American culture is seen as merely a shadow of mainstream American culture, if it's recognized as a culture at all. But I think what we're really talking about here is a question of agency. Black musicians were robbed of a sense of agency when their music was commodified and appropriated. It would stand to reason that as they reclaimed this sense of agency, they would also want to reclaim the narrative about where the music came from and what it should be called.
Yeah, Dara. Well done.
Thank you.
For you, Black American music or Black classical music, how has that helped you to do what you do in a seamless way when you present on stage or on your records?
Well, I've found myself on recent gigs talking about it more.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really thought of myself in that way. I haven't really used that label, I guess. It's really Black American music is a term that has been championed by trumpeter Nicholas Payton, who appears in that video, who has really kind of revived this conversation around, this usage of the word jazz and what the history of it is and the problematic nature of all of that. He was really an inspiration for me to really start to do my own study around this video. And Greg can attest to the fact that I spent probably, a day and a half investigating. Greg gave me a couple prompts because he's been kind of on me because this is Jazz Appreciation Month. And he's been on me to kind of do some more content around this, which I was looking forward to. But he mentioned, hey, we might want to put something out there about jazz and, this the provenance of the word. So he mentioned the original Dixieland Jazz Band, which I know Nicholas has done some investigation and talking about. And I mean, that was all the prompt that I needed. Like I was off to the races, a day and a half of just investigating, which is a really good exercise for me to really take time, because it's like I've heard Nicholas talking about the word jazz and, this is a dirty word. And he's mentioned, he's the one to repeat this Max Roach aphorism that jazz is a four-letter word. He's got a song about it. But I so I'd heard some inklings of this, and I'm very aware this is, Black American music is a much better term for this. And, I understand the generalities around it, but had never really investigated a lot of what Nicholas had to say. So Greg mentions this original jazz band. Of course, my mind, just with all the investigative work that I do with these videos, my reporter bone kicked in. So I'm just, looking up, whatever I can find, and okay, a lot of times when things are repeated again and again, well, jazz means this and jazz means this. It's okay, what's the reality here? What can we etymologically really trace and verify? And what's the real history and how did this happen? And, it's when I got into looking at the articles that were written early and how did this really take place? So that was a fun experience for me to really do my own investigation around this. But I have found myself talking about this idea of Black American music more from the stand and kind of, you know, referring to what I do. Because, you know, folks who have heard me perform, they know you're gonna get some of everything.
Yeah.
You know, Greg and I have had our own, you know, debates back and forth around this, to be honest about it.
Yeah.
Because Greg he's all about improvisational music. He's all about, you know, being true to this particular art form because it's a great love of his between, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but between so-called jazz and hip hop. Those have been huge influences for you.
Sure.
But for
Blues,
me,
too.
for me, it's been more, it's been much more all over the place. I mean, it's been singer-songwriter. It's been a lot of gospel, even CCM and just, of course, classic standards and things like that. And I am, you know, as the title of the podcast says, I am all over the place. I'm all over the place musically. Yeah. So I feel a certain amount of self-consciousness sometimes when I get into what I do, because I'm like, we're at a jazz club. Is there a requirement? There's been only really one club we've ever played at that has told us,
really weird,
you must play jazz. You may not do any of your own material, which is just
jive.
That's just.
But the audience loved it. They were way into it, and you still snuck in one of your tunes, and they love that. It's just the people aren't the problem; it's the gatekeepers, and that's a totally different podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I've talked about this more from the stage in recent performances. This idea that this all needs to live together.
Yeah,
I'm not going to feel self-conscious about doing a gospel song if that's part of where I came from.
Right.
And just watching, you know, heroes of mine like Liz Wright, Gregory Porter, who come from where I come from
Nina
musically.
Simone.
Nina, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Just taught a class on her recently. Who come from where I come from musically, meaning they come from the church, really.
Yeah. Truth.
You know, Black gospel music. And then I had the CCM on top of that. But just like the delivering those messages and things like that, you're not going to hear anything more heartfelt from me other than my own music.
Right.
You know, than for me to get into a hymn or me to get into you know, some churchy thing where I can play the tambourine or whatever. So an audience is going to hear a depth that they would not otherwise experience if I'm able to just stretch out and be all of the things that I am.
As a Black woman.
Which really is a presentation of the full scope of Black American music. So like, no, I'm not going to accept from any, you know, so-called curator that this doesn't belong and that doesn't belong and whatever. It's like, we're going to be musically integral.
That's right.
Regardless of what we do. And I'm playing with people who have some deep, you know, jazz training. I'm always putting that in quotation marks, but I don't want to be tripping over the word every time I have to say it. But I'm playing with some really skilled improvisers. I'll say that.
Yeah.
So it's gonna sit right regardless.
That's right. That's right.
So I don't have to be self-conscious about it.
No.
And I think it serves the audience when you do embrace it. You know, you embrace all of these parts of yourself.
Absolutely.
So that's, I've been working towards that more.
And the story that you told was embraced. I was surprised.
You're speaking of the video itself?
Yeah, the video. Excuse me. I was really surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I put 3 days of work into each of these videos. You know, some serious scripting, investigation, reporting, filming, editing. The whole process takes time. So to have a video that gets out there and just kind of, you know, is middling to not great, can be a real disappointment. Yeah. But I was like going into this, I'm like, well, you know, it'll do what it does. Yeah. We know this is for us. We know this is for the culture. These are, you know, he who hath ears, let him hear. We're just going to put this out there and let it do what it does. And then, you know, people are in the comments just like, oh my God, I didn't know about this. I went to jazz school and I didn't know. And thank you so much for sharing this with us. And I have never heard this. And just real shocking for both of us, I think.
Right. I was
very pleasantly surprised that this thing, as of last viewing, has about 100,000, 105,000 views.
Yeah.
Did really well. Did all right.
That's off.
Yeah. I did another video you might want to check out called, what is it called? That's What Friends Are For. Yeah. It's kind of a song story, a little bit of a breakdown,
reaction
a deconstruction,
video.
a breakdown. Yeah. Reaction video. Breakdown video of a performance of That's What Friends Are For on the NAACP Awards in 86 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. But the jazz video, I have to say, is not available on Instagram. It's only on TikTok. I had a little bit of a conflict with it. Somebody who was involved in the video actually said that they didn't want it up.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of a compromise. I had to take it off of Instagram, left it up on TikTok. That's just where I land with it, you know.
Sure.
And I'm not even in the habit of letting people tell me where, you know, whether I should be posting them. But I took it down from a particular platform. So if you want to see it, you'll have to head over to Instagram, to TikTok, Dara Starr Tucker on TikTok to find it.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it.
We want to give a little snippet of some of that Black American music we were referring to by playing a little bit of a clip from a recent performance
at Minton's Playhouse in Harlem. And folks, if you don't know, this is one of the few stages in existence still to this day where Billie Holiday, Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk actually performed. It's still in existence today. And we had the immense privilege of playing there most recently. And man, talk about an audience that embraced you in the fullness of what you brought.
Yeah.
Man, I still have good vibes from that show.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And we had some friends that showed up and kind of helped to
take off even more.
Push us along and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're looking to keep up with the music that I do, just find me at darastartucker.com, DARASTARR. Tucker.com, and I try to keep an updated show schedule there. We're going to be in May. We'll be in
Nashville.
Greg, you help me with our dates here.
Nashville, May 21st at the Nashville Jazz Workshop. Tickets are on sale now if you're near or know somebody near. And then May 28th in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the new Lowdown Club, formerly Duet Jazz Room. Beautiful facility. Both of those facilities are beautiful. You can get tickets online. But go to darastartucker.com for info on that.
Yeah. And people have asked also whether I do speaking engagements. There's an email on the website, on the contact page, Greg's email, because he acts as my manager and booking agent at the moment. But jgregbryant@gmail.com. You can always reach out to him and make those types of requests. But we want to play a little snippet of something from the Minton's show that we just finished doing. And then I will be back after that with a brief segment to end the show called Finding Your Voice. I want to talk to you about how to get your voice out there, techniques that I've used for getting the word out. Greg, you said you wanted me to talk about something very specific today.
Sure. This edition of Finding Your Voice, and you agreed, is about stop saving people from yourself.
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Coming up in just a moment.
You take my breath away. You put my heart together with your love. Oh, and when I think I'm finished counting all the lovely days, I remember they could never be enough. Oh, if you asked me to, I would stop and start anew. If you asked me to, I would turn your gray skies blue. If you asked me to, I would change my point of view. If you ask me to, ask me to, ask me to. Well, in the Finding Your Voice segment, I want to talk to you today about the idea of making yourself small and squishing yourself to what you think is a bite-sized portion for your audience. A lot of us, including myself, are guilty of this mindset. And I feel like we think that it is beneficial. We think that it is going to help us to find more people and to cast a broader net, to sort of become this generic, all-purpose, nondescript version of ourselves to try and appeal to as many people as we possibly can. I have been so guilty of this in the past. A lot of why I started my TikTok channel was that I was tired of being that person who did not speak out and who did not show a lot of who they were out of fear of offending people, of being the type of person that I was always taught not to be. And I talked some about that in the last segment. But I think the trap that we can sometimes get into is assuming that our audience is not able to fully digest who we are. And the strange thing is that we know that that's not true because there are many people that we look to. We talked about inspirations today. There are many people that we look to as an inspiration, and we're cheering them on. Meanwhile, we are backing away into the shadows and making ourselves small because, oh no, people couldn't take me. They couldn't take who I am and what I really do and what I really have to say. But I think part of the correction, part of the tweaking of that mindset for a lot of us comes in being able to accept ourselves, comes in being able to accept ourselves and accept that the problem is really not always with the audience. The problem really has to do with whether or not we can fully embrace and appreciate who we are in the world. Are we allowing ourselves to be all of who we are in the world and to bring that wealth of experience and of knowledge and of pain and of joy and flaws? Or do we constantly feel the need to cover up and to hide and to put on airs? Because that in itself is exhausting. If you are wondering why you are having trouble relaying who you are and your personality to the world, because a lot of us, we have business propositions that we're trying to get off the ground. We have all of this ambition and all these things that we're just, wanting to take off. But we know a lot of that requires that we interface with the world. In this day and age, we know that it requires that we know how to be comfortable on social media, putting ourselves out there. And if you feel like you're having a challenge with the idea of putting yourself out there, there are a few questions that you should be asking yourself. You should ask yourself, number one, am I being excessively judgmental of other people who are putting themselves out there? Do I look at other people's flaws and say that disqualifies you from being heard? Or do we allow other people to share who they are, and do we embrace their flaws as a part of the totality of who they are and look for the message? As the old saying says, do we eat the fruit and spit out the seeds? Or are we being excessively judgmental? And a lot of that kind of thinking we learn in our youth. So if that's your default mode, is judgment of other people, then when it comes time for you to put yourself out there, you're going to be excessively judgmental of yourself. And so that's a trap. So first of all, we have to learn to start looking at other folks, particularly folks in the public eye, with a new mind and with a new understanding that, hey, we're all human. We are all figuring this thing out. Wow, I love what that person is doing. Like, I wouldn't probably do it that way, but usually when you start putting yourself out there, your whole attitude about other people who are in the public eye, it really does shift, because then you understand how difficult it is. And then the second part of it is that in order to get to that place, we have to really be accepting of ourselves in the reality of what we are. We oftentimes assume that our audience only sees what we want them to see. But the truth of the matter is they are seeing a whole lot that's underneath the surface that we may not even mean to convey. And that can be for good or for bad. But they're seeing a whole lot more than what you think they are. Even when you think that you're presenting a perfect image, they're still seeing a whole lot of the real you. And you know that because you see a lot of the real folks that you follow and that you pay attention to. But if there are chinks in the armor, if there are cracks, if there are imperfections, part of it we can embrace because we know that they're human and it endears them to us. And so if we are able to accept imperfections and embrace imperfections from the people that we love and that we follow, then why can't we embrace those things in ourselves? Or why can't we accept that other people would be able to embrace those things within us? So give yourself grace, give fellow creators or fellow entrepreneurs, fellow people who are aspiring to put themselves out there, give them the grace to be who they are. They need grace. We need grace in order to find the truth of what we're supposed to be presenting to the world. You got to get out there and you got to practice and you got to try and you got to let yourself be imperfect in that process and take away the judgment. Take away the judgment from those that you observe so that it will absolve you from the judgment that you place upon yourself. This is Dara Starr Tucker, and this has been Finding Your Voice. You are listening to the I'm All Over the Place podcast with Dara Starr Tucker, special guest host Greg Bryant. Thank you all so much for joining us. Instagram, you can find me at Dara Tucker B. TikTok, you can find me at Dara Starr Tucker. I'm on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, anywhere that you find social media, you're going to find me. So we hope to see you on the next episode. Tell somebody about the podcast, and we hope to see you really, really soon.